Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'd like to take a look at some upcoming Mega Rayquaza deck ideas that I've had for the set Delta Rain. Now, Mega Rayquaza is sadly not going to be joining us until November, but in case you want to get ahead of the curve, so to speak, and try out some new deck ideas and build some proxy decks before, Rayquaza drops, then that's probably a good idea, just, to work out the best ways to play Mega Ray. And of course, you might also find something in the video that you're like, oh, this actually seems like it could be a lot of fun to try out when Mega Rayquaza does eventually come out. So yeah, that's basically the nature of today's video. So Mega Ray as an overview, well, 280 HP colorless basic, so it is a Mega, so giving up the 3 prize cards is pretty rough. And I've seen a lot of people already complain about this online, that, 280 HP is not a lot for a Mega to have, which is, yeah, it's kind of crazy to have to say this in 2026, I guess, but, it is a state of the power creep. But I'd imagine that, like, post-rotation, we're going to lose a lot of, like, really potent stuff in the format right now. Things like Festival Lead and Dragapult all just go away with rotation. So, we will have a couple of months with those cards, but then after that, we've still got a couple of years with Mega Rayquaza in Standard, in addition to what other Megas and whatever they do with the next generation as well. So I do think that's worth bearing in mind. Mega Rayquaza could also get stronger as time goes on, so I think that's important. But yeah, it does have the very useful ability Champion's Roar, which says when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you can look at the top 4 cards and accelerate a basic energy you find there to this Pokemon, and then the other cards get shuffled onto the bottom of your deck. And then Storm Emeralda for a Fire Lightning Colorless does 50 damage for each Fire and Lightning attached to all your Pokemon in play, which is a very nice attack, but it does mean that you'll need 7 energy to hit 350, which is kind of rough in this day and age. Like, that is a lot of energy to have. So in theory, you will need 2 Mega Rayquazas at least fully set up in order to do 300. So yeah, that's kind of a rough overview of the maths. But yeah, weakness to lightning is also a bit scary just because, like, Mega Manectric could come in and out of the format. I'm recording this video before we get Pitch Black, but like, Mega Manectric does receive a sizable buff in the form of that Bolty Lightning Energy, I think it is. It gives it plus 20 damage, so that could be a bit scary. Also, a resistance to fighting is quite nice, just to deal with things like Mega Lucario in case that ever becomes popular, or like Tyrantrum, I guess. But like, I don't really think fighting types are all that scary in the TCG right now, but again, could become stronger in the future. And I think we are supposed to see at least one more Mega Lucario set this year, which is kind of crazy, so like, that's also something worth considering. But yeah, the Fire and Lightning support means there'll be plenty of ways to go about building Mega Ray though, and we have 2 years worth of sets that could support it. So, of course, there is potential that we see a massive buff to this in the near future. But yeah, as a first idea, I've just gone with Kangaskhan. I think Kangaskhan's a really solid shout. It's a decent attacker with Rapid Fire combo, and then Run Errand is just your way of drawing through your deck. Of course, you might draw a bunch of energy that you don't want because, of course, you'd rather accelerate them with the ability. But then at that point, you could try and discard them with Ultra Ball and then reattach them with things like Glass Trumpet, which could be a good shout. You've also got things like Bouffalon and Terrapagos if you want to lean into a more Area Zero, like toolbox kind of build, with things like Latias to give you a stuff-free retreat, Fezandipity for some more draw power, things like that. Blood Moon Rusalona, of course, for a little bit. But yeah, that kind of deck could exist in theory. Like, the Bouffalon extra bulk could be nice. Terrapagos with Crown Umpul, sadly, does not protect you from other Rayquazas, which is quite funny, actually. I've just realized that Crown Opal won't protect you from other Mega Rays or any other Mega Kangaskhan players, which is a bit of a shame, but it will protect you from other basics like Raging Bolt and Lily's Clefairy and Ogerpon, so at the very least, Crown Opal will give you a bit of protection there. But I guess, like, Unified Beatdown is, like, your main attack here, right? Because Crown Opal would require you to play Water Grass Energy on top of playing Fire and Lightning, which might just be a bit too much at that point. Like, maybe you could make it work with Crispin and Trumpet, but like, yeah, I think Unified Beatdown's probably like the better, more efficient secondary attacker. But honestly, I could just see this existing with just Kangaskhan and Bouffalon. But like, it just depends on how much deck space you think you'll need, because like, Rayquaza really needs to be hitting those abilities to accelerate the energy. So that is something worth bearing in mind. Also, this deck kind of just hard loses to a Team Rocket's Watchtower, so you'll have to find plenty of counter stadiums to deal with that potential threat as well. So cool things that should be worth considering while building the deck. But yeah, I do have a lot of faith that Kangaskhan will be a fantastic option for Rayquaza. Next up is we have Dynamotor, pretty much a classic Ray Eels trying to do that kind of build. Has the ability Dynamotor, of course. Once in your turn, you may attach a basic Light Energy card from your discard pile to one of your bench Pokemon, which is a very nice ability to have in the game. Like Mega Electros, I've highlighted here as like a really solid secondary attacker. Like, say you don't finish off a Pokemon with Mega Ray, like you're 50 damage short or whatever, then Split Bomb could come in there and finish them off, maybe soften up another attacker, and then that would put some pressure off like your next Mega Ray being able to finish them off. So, things like that is quite handy to have. Then also Disaster Shock doing 190 and Polarisis while discarding some energy just means that you can potentially lock down your opponent's threat, whatever it may be. Then, of course, you've got things like Carmine, things like Canary to help you get set up and energy in the discard pile, as well as Prism Tower, which is a great counter stadium for Team Rocket's Watchtower, but also just a really nice stadium to have in this deck because it's extra draw power and it's also that discard synergy, which is really nice to have with Dynamotor. So, yeah, I do really like Dynamotor. I think this will be a very solid build of the deck. It is going to get a bit awkward, like having to fit like so many eels in the list, while also like trying to keep the deck consistent and of course having enough energy to hit those abilities. And then at that point you have to worry about not really having much of a draw support on the bench, like maybe Pheasantipity, like maybe you play Kangaskhan in this build as well, like maybe you just try and rely on Prism Towers and Pokegears and things, but that could get a bit risky with Special Red Card being a thing. So I do worry about this build, sort of. Like I feel like there's a bit of negativity around it, I guess, when comparing things to like the Dynamotor with Flaffy, I think it was, with like Mega Rayquaza. Not the Mega Rayquaza, sorry, the Rayquaza VMAX. Because that deck was kind of hyped up a lot going into Evolving Skies. And then that deck really didn't do much in Standard. So like if this ends up being the same kind of deck, then that's unfortunate. But at the same time, back then we didn't have Electros that can attack. We didn't have a Carmine supporter. We didn't have Canary. We didn't have Prism Tower. So at the same time, I do think this deck has at least more options than Mega Ray had than Ray VMAX had. Sorry, they're all called Rayquaza, so it's hard to distinguish them all between each other. But yeah, I do have more faith basically in Dynamotor this time around. But yeah, we'll have to try it out. Also, Electric being from one of the special black and white sets is kind of annoying, just in terms of being able to get a hold of it. But hopefully that shouldn't be too hard. And of course, I'd always recommend testing things out with proxies before you really commit to a deck, or at least give it a go online first. But yeah, Electric, honestly, it doesn't seem terrible. Could be a really solid option here. Next up, is we have a Flareon box. Now, the reason I'm including Flareon box here is because I've seen no one else really talk about Flareon online, which is kind of strange to me because Flareon is just a very efficient attacker, as well as a very efficient way of getting energy on the board. Burning Charge for Fire Colors does 130, then you get to search your deck for up to 2 basic energy and attach them to one of your Pokemon. So a very nice way of just accelerating some energy, and then even then Carnoline for a Fire, Water, Lightning. So you would have to add a couple of water energy to your list, but Carnoline does do 280, and then Flareon can't attack next turn. But say you have like the Terra Crystal, attached to Flareon, then you could use Carnoline for a Fire and a Lightning, for example. So there are ways to get around that as well, but you still probably play the Crystal anyways, your A-Spec. But yeah, Burning Charge, really solid first attack there, just get 2 energy on the board. So, like, if your opponent doesn't remove Flareon or remove your Rayquaza you've just accelerated to, then in theory, that is, 5 energy in theory? Because, like, you've got 2 energy on Flareon, you've just accelerated 2, you've benched Rayquaza as well, so that's got an additional energy. So, next turn, you're basically just set up for either a Carnoline play or attaching another energy somewhere else and having the full 300. So, Flareon seems like a decent early game attacker as well. Also very easy to set up with the likes of Fan Rotom, who can find your Eevees as well as your Noctowls and Hootoots, which is definitely going to be your main kind of draw engine. Again, you could use Area Zero, you could start attacking with Terrapagos, you could attack with other things like Regigigas. But I think overall you probably don't need many of those options. Like I think Fan Rotom, Flareon, Noctowl plus Rayquaza is probably enough, to be honest. Just because, again, you still want to be hitting those abilities and energy attachments. So I think that's going to be a big thing with Rayquaza is just how many energy do you run, Because if you don't have enough, then you're going to whiff those abilities, and all of a sudden, Rayquaza is a bit more of a liability than it once was. So, yeah, it's going to be important to have enough energy in the list for sure. But yeah, I do think Flareon EX will be a really solid version of this deck. Next up is we have a Turbo Talonflame build. Now, I didn't think Talonflame was enough by itself to justify its own slot because it could just be paired up with things like Kangaskhan as well. But I did want to mention Blaziken, so I figured, okay, why not just smush them together, with the Dunsparce? Yeah, Talonflame could be useful, help you find things like rare candies, help you find Hildas and stuff, so that could be quite nice. Blaziken seems like a bit of a downgrade to Dynamotor at first glance, but Blaziken does give you the type coverage of fire types, meaning you get to one-shot things like Exadrill, as well as one-shotting Hydrapples, Beedrills more efficiently, so I do think that aspect is really nice, so Blaziken could be a very efficient attacker. Also, 320 HP as a two-prize Pokemon in this deck is really nice to have as well. So, yeah, I do think Blaziken's really solid. And again, very easy to get set up with Dunsparce and Clawhunt. So, yeah, I do like Talonflame. Like, I don't think it's terrible. Like, definitely the best combo that I've seen people talk about online, really. And it's the one that I thought of as well. Like, you just use Hilda to find Talonflame and Ignition Energy. Granted, that's not, like, super easy to do, turn one going second. Like, ideally, you would want to have a bit of an easier combo, but, we could get there. If we have to use Meowth, then we have to use it. But, like, even then, like, 4 copies of Pokegear, a bunch of Hilda, fingers crossed we get there, right? Like, we should hopefully get enough. But even if we don't get Hilda and we just get Ignition Energy, then an Ultra Ball would get us to Talonflame as well. So also there's like Perrin, I guess. Was it Perrin? Is Perrin legal in Standard? I think Perrin's legal. There's like one random supporter who lets you find other like Pokemon. There's also there's Dawn, I guess. Like we could Dawn for Talonflame, Dunsparce, and Rayquaza, or like some of the chicken line as well as Rayquaza and Talonflame. So there's multiple ways we can try and build this, but yeah, I do think Clawhunt's decent. It's just a shame that Talonflame's obviously a Colorless Pokemon, so you're not getting any type coverage from it, and it also has the exact same weakness and resistance as Rayquaza, which is a bit unfortunate. But at the very least, it's a 280 HP, two-prize Pokemon with free retreat, so it does have that going for it at the very least. And 150 is also like solid damage. It's not crazy damage, but it's solid damage to be putting out. If we ever get any more viable Pokemon moving forward, we have no idea what they're going to reveal at Worlds, of course, so they might reveal a new mechanic that has way less HP. Fingers crossed for breaks, am I right? Breaks, ancient traits, maybe level X actually. I'm getting a bit sidetracked here. But the point stands that like Clawhunt could still two-shot the future mechanic, whatever it is. Because I don't think they'll keep giving us Pokemon with like 400 plus HP. Surely not. Like they could, right? That they could. But I think the next mechanic will be like less HP. So Clawhunt should still be decent at that point. But yeah, moving on, we have Ethan's Ho-Oh, which is a really solid, in theory, good attacker, as well as a very good way of accelerating some energy. Now, sadly, it's just to itself, but it is 2 energy, so at the very least, we will have to use like energy switch. But that is 2 energy. It's good. It's a good way of getting the energy on the board, of course. It's plus 100 damage. And then Shining Feathers does 160 and then heal 50 from each of your Pokemon. So again, if you want to make your Rayquazas a bit tankier, or you want to deal with a Dragapult player, I guess that could be a nice way of doing it. But yeah, the 160 is not super powerful, but I suppose it could be like a solid secondary attacker. And also, if you get 2 Ethan's Ho-Oh, turn 1 going second, it is quite easy to do Shining Feathers, so that's nice. Put a bit of pressure on the opponent. Then also, Ethan's Macargo could be a nice little single prize option. I've got it down as a 3-2 line here, but realistically, you could just play this as a 1-1 or even just a 2-2, or even just not at all if you didn't fancy it. But I just thought it was worth mentioning as a solid single prize option because you can just stack a load of energy on Ethan's Macargo and one-shot stuff. So the fact that Ethan's Ho-Oh and plus Macargo has kind of survived already is like a deck post-rotation. It gives me faith that if you include Rayquaza and some lightning energy, then it'll still be fine and it'll still function. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to this just because I really like the Ethan stuff. Like Ethan's adventure is a bit more hit or miss because it's not really getting the amount of energy that Fire Breather does, but it's also like not accelerating the lightning energy, which is probably what you want for Crispin. So supporter counts could get a bit weird in this deck, but it's a couple of Ethan's adventure, a couple of Crispin, maybe a couple of Lilies. Yeah, could be really solid to be honest, but you will have to run energy switch to get the energy to accelerate to Rayquaza. So always something worth bearing in mind. But then next up is we have a Turbo Cinderace / Iron Thorns deck. Now, I know that Iron Thorns seems kind of counterproductive because it turns off your own Rayquaza, but if you have to hide behind Iron Thorns to slow down your opponent, then I don't think it's that bad, really. Like, especially not when you have things like Crispin anyway to accelerate energy. So then, for example, use Cinderace to accelerate some energy to a Rayquaza, but perhaps that's not enough energy, perhaps you need a bit more time. You could then use something like an Iron Thorns. Crispin easily gets you to a Volt Cyclone. Then you could conserve energy with Volt Cyclone to accelerate energy to a Rayquaza. Now, that's not saying you have to play Iron Thorns in this kind of build, but like it's just an idea that I had kind of floating around in my head, so I thought, why not? AZ's Tranquility plus Jumbo Ice Cream could also be a nice way of just healing a bit of damage and moving around your Pokemon with AZ, especially. You could also run things like Super Scoop Up Cyclone if you really fancied it, but yeah, just fun optional ways basically to move around. There's also that new Zinnia's Resolve card, I think it is. Is it Zinnia's Resolve? The one that's like switch out your active Pokemon, then also move an energy to the new active Pokemon from the one that you just put on the bench. So there's different ways of like moving around energy and switching. So that's pretty cool to see. So like you could like Zinnia your Cinderace, even though it has free retreat, but it would keep the energy that you spent on Turbo Flare. So that's nice at least. Yeah, the fact that Turbo Flare already pokes for 50 is quite nice in Rayquaza because it's already the modifier that you're working with. So if you're 50 short of something, or that you know you'll be 50 short of like carrying a massive Pokemon EX or something, then Turbo Flare will get the 50 in there for you. So that's really nice. Of course, this deck might be slightly weak if you don't open with Cinderace. Like there is also that hazard with Cinderace decks, but if you're willing to take that risk, then I think there could be some really fun builds here. Then moving on, we have the Farfetch'd combo. Now this one's a bit more on the Looney Tunes kind of side of things, but it could be good, right? Right, we use Fan Rotom, we find a bunch of Farfetch'd. Now Farfetch'd has the ability Impromptu Carrier, which allows you to search your deck for a tool card and attach it to itself. And then Mega Rayquaza Cap says for each of your Pokemon in play that has a Mega Rayquaza Cap attached to it, search your deck for basic energy and attach it to that Pokemon. So you can kind of see what we're going for here. So this is kind of like what the sample board state would, in theory, look like assuming everything went right. So turn one going second, we use Fan Rotom. We find our 3 Farfetch'd. They in turn find their 3 Rayquaza Caps. Then we also get 1 energy on the active Rayquaza. Then we use Petrol to find the other Rayquaza Cap. And then we bench Rayquaza. So we have like a second Rayquaza on the board established because that's our last bench slot as well. Then that gives itself an energy. And in theory, we have 7 energy on turn 2 from the next manual attachment. So in theory, that's the plan, right? Because we have 1 manual on turn 1. Then the Rayquaza Cap will give itself an energy. So we will have 2 energy on the active Mega Ray. We will have 3 energy on benched Farfetch'd. And then we also have another energy on the Mega Ray on the bench. So that's in theory how we're getting there. The only problem is that it's a wee bit less energy if we've prized a cap or a Farfetch'd. So I would recommend running 4 of each just in case, just in case something goes wrong. But like the most important thing really is that no matter what you have in the active spot, it has to attack with a cap because you need the extra cap energy. The cap active is how you're getting the other caps to actually do anything. Like there's no point putting 3 Farfetch'd on the bench with 3 caps if the cap is on the wrong Pokemon. So like you have to attack with the active cap. So like that's the important thing here. But yeah, if you miss the active cap, then you have to use like an energy switch or Crispin. So yeah, that's also assuming that your benched Ray also got the energy. So like that's kind of important as well. But I think this could be a lot of fun to try out. Like it's a lot of things have to go right. I'm looking for words here to say because like yeah, it's a bit risky. Like you do need the caps to actually do their thing, but if it all goes well, if it all works, then it's fantastic. If it doesn't, then we have a problem. Like we just have a problem. Also, if your opponent plays like a Rockets Watchtower, then yeah, if they play that turn 1, then we will need to find a stadium as well to deal with that. But I guess that's true for any of these builds, really. But yeah, still, I think this could be a lot of fun. It's definitely a build that I'm really looking forward to trying out at some point. Is it going to be the best build? Probably not, but I think it will be a blast to try out at the very least. Next up, those we have Iono's Box, which I've seen a lot of buzz for this online. It seems like this is one of the more popular options for sure. So Iono's Belly Bolt has 280 HP and the ability Electric Streamer. As often as you like during a turn, you may attach a basic Lightning card from your hand to one of your Iono's Pokemon. So it's cool because it just basically means unlimited energy on Belly Bolt and Kilowattrel, which doubles as our draw engine for the deck, which is great. But of course, it's only attaching to Iono's Pokemon, and it's not accelerating Fire Energy. So, for example, if you bench a Rayquaza, right, and Rayquaza gives itself a Lightning Energy, that's fine, I guess, but at the same time, you'd much rather it accelerates Fire Energy to itself, because you get as much Lightning as you want, and then you can use things like Energy Switch and stuff, which you will probably have to use. Like, you'll still have to use things like Crispin and Energy Switch in this build. But I think the fact that you can just splash out a couple of lightning whenever you feel like it will make this build very potent. Like, it's not going to be a flood the board with like 6 million lightning energy from the hand every turn, but it is going to be like the extra 2 or 3 copies here and there is going to what makes this very good. So I do like it in that regard. And then Kilowatt Troll is just a very nice draw engine to have. So, that's handy, very handy. You do have to put an energy on Kilowatt Troll, but, that shouldn't matter too much. At the very least, you could also like do some cool things where like Kilowatt Troll could conserve an energy, and then so you get extra damage from Rayquaza, but then next turn, say your opponent hits you with a Judge or something, then you could use a Flashing Draw to like draw out of it, basically. So some fun little combos to be had out of this. Seems very solid. Also, I don't think Owner's Belly Bolt is particularly expensive EX card, so if you're worried about budget, I know it's not something I've been talking about throughout this whole video, but I guess if you were worried about like the cost of things, then, at the very least, that's also something positive to consider. But yeah, could be a lot of fun, this build. Then we have an Ember box in 9th place. I was debating including Oricorio in this slot, but I was just like, you know what? I really don't like Oricorio right now. I'm going to do Ember. So Ember has Inferno Fandango. As often as you like during your turn, you may attach a basic energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon. So the whole aspect about this deck, of course, is we're just going to try and get a turn 2 Ember play, fingers crossed. And then that will give us unlimited energy for the rest of the game. And what's nice about this compared to Belly Bolt is that we can just put the Pharangi wherever we want. It's not just to a certain type of Pokemon. So we can use other attackers like Reshiram if you fancied it, a nice little single prize option. You could use Ens Dormantian if you really fancied it, like a little bit of a sniping option potentially. But yeah, honestly, I think Ember could be a really solid option. Of course, we do have to get it set up, and because Pig Knight is such a big pig and has like 8 HP, we will have to use Precious Trolley, so that's a bit of a pain. But I guess it works out in the end because Reshiram has 130, so it's not such a big deal. Like, maybe we don't use Precious Trolley, maybe we just use Pokepad, and fingers crossed that's enough, because like we don't want a Precious Trolley our Rayquaza's out, of course, because, then the ability won't trigger, so that's a bit of a problem there. But I still think this deck has decent potential. Like, Fire Breather is great, of course. Like, we just run 1 or 2 copies of them, find all the energy we could ever need, and then, yeah, just one-shot some stuff. We will have to accelerate a lightning energy, so we either need to manually attach that, use the ability it's from itself, or use a Crispin. So, there's that to consider, but at the end of the day, I do think Ember could be a really solid idea. But yeah, which build are you most looking forward to with Mega Rayquaza? Do you think you'll be giving it a go? And yeah, thank you for watching.